Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and today is episode 116, and we are going to take a look at the United States Antarctic Program. It's an interesting one. I didn't know it went back so far, back to the 1950s, so I am impressed with that. But first of all, let me give a big shout out to my listeners. So a big shout out to Virginia, Texas, Oklahoma, New York, and British Columbia. In terms of countries, the United States, Canada, and the Russian Federation. Now, in terms of a little bit of housekeeping, the month of June is also the National Safety Month. So I guess in terms, like when I think of safety, I think of like when you're riding your bike, you're wearing a helmet. If you're going rollerblading, then you're wearing knee pads or elbow pads, things like that. But anything that has to do with safety, I think is a really good thing. So just FYI, it is National Safety Month, so that's always a good thing. Okay, so let's take a look at the United States Antarctic Program and just a little bit of background to it. It was formed in 1959. This particular program is headquartered out of Alexandria, Virginia. I'm kind of surprised by that. I'm surprised it's not based out of Washington, D.C., because it deals with the federal government. Now, in terms of employees, they say that they have 3,000 employees, but they really don't. And they're not permanent employees. Most of the time, they only have like 50 to 200 people that are actually, I would say, full-time workers, full-time employees for this particular program. And there are not that many people that actually work in this program because it is in Antarctica, So it's not one of those programs that has a lot of people, so I don't know where they are getting the number of 3,000 unless they are including everybody that ever visits there and ever works there, because this program has a lot of researchers that go there and travel to the Antarctic, and they do their research and things like that. There are students and teachers, researchers, scientists, whatever the case may be, because, the Antarctic, it is not inhabitable. It's not really livable. It has hardly any wildlife or animal life. So that's why that 3,000 number is not completely accurate. So it kind of depends on how many people are visiting there. So their annual budget for this program, this is kind of shocking, and this is what I don't like about this program. Their annual budget, which means this is the money they are going to spend anyway, regardless, okay? This is what they are allotted. And this was back in 2008, so more than likely this has drastically increased. They were given $356 million for the year of 2008. Now, considering that they only have about 50 to 200 employees, that's really shocking that they get $356 million a year. And this was back in 2008. So, needless to say, it's not really positive when you're talking that kind of money, because that tells me that it's not paying for itself. And, when I think about that kind of money, I think about how many people can that help. We have people that have chronic illnesses. We have, the elderly. We have women and children, that suffer from domestic violence. We have our veterans. We also have homeless people. We have a lot of homeless here in the United States, unfortunately. Some of them choose to be homeless, and some of them, they made a mistake, or maybe they just don't want to hold down a job, and that's why they're homeless. The majority of them that are homeless have a mental illness. So, needless to say, there are people that have a mental illness and they refuse to take their medicine. So many of them think, well, I don't need that, you're the problem. Well, actually, they are the problem. But it's whatever is going on in their mind that is the issue, because what's interesting is that once they get back on their medication, they're perfectly fine. But it's one of those things, like there's some mental illnesses, and I've met people that have this issue. The better they get on their medicine, like the more the medicine works, the more the person thinks, see, I don't need this. And then they stop taking it. It's just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I just don't understand when it comes to mental illness and medications like that, why there are some mental illnesses that they know they need the medication, so they take it, and then there are other mental illnesses where they're like, I don't need that. I just don't understand the stupidity of that. See, because here's the thing, they know that whenever they have bronchitis or pneumonia, they know they need antibiotics. They know that. And they take those medicines. But there's something to do, I think it comes down to pride. Because I've met people that have this issue. They're like, I don't need that. Everybody else is the problem. I mean, is there a mental illness issue there? Yes, for sure. But I've noticed that whenever people have a problem with pride or arrogance, they blame everybody else for their issues. And they don't take responsibility for what is happening. So they don't want to acknowledge what is actually going on. I think the majority of this money that is going towards this program could easily go towards other things. I think they are overspending. Because it's not a large program, and plus they don't produce a lot of results. Hardly any. Like first of all, I had never heard of this program until we started looking into labor laws and also the different departments within the United States federal government. Because, these are federal tax dollars that are going towards this program. So that basically means whatever monies we are paying in federal tax dollars are going towards this. So that's why we should be aware of it. What is sad to me is that, yes, I think this is a very interesting program, and I'm sure it does some good, but it doesn't heal people of illnesses. It doesn't identify new diseases. It doesn't identify new species per se. They don't really produce any results. I mean, they study glaciers, they study ecosystems, they study the ocean and the atmospheric sciences and things like that. But they're not really producing anything. It's just research that doesn't really come to fruition. So that greatly disappoints me on that. Now, mind you, with the Antarctic program, the United States has a couple of research facilities there, but there are other countries and other entities that also do research and study programs there as well. What I'm concerned is that the United States is fitting the bill for everybody. It doesn't say that, but just from what I read about this program, it sounds almost like NATO, where the United States is yet again being put on the hook for the cost of this program. Whereas in NATO, the United States, financially, we are put on the hook, whenever someone goes to war within NATO. And I don't think that's right. And, President Trump was right when he said that NATO is not paying its bills. Like, it's just expecting the United States to do everything. These other countries were not helping with the financial cost and the financial burden of the task that NATO wanted to do. These other countries, usually from Europe, they act like a spoiled, rotten little kid on aisle 7 at a Toys R Us. They just want to spend, but it's someone else's money. I think that is what is going on with this program, even though I have no doubt they have very interesting research and they do interesting things. That doesn't equate to looking the other way. Like they basically need to earn their keep. And I think that $356 million should go towards something else. Now, I don't think this program should be done away with, but I think their budget is too big. I think they should maybe get 10 or 13 million a year. I think that's reasonable, considering that, they don't have electricity at their facilities in Antarctica. They have to run everything off of diesel powered generators. Because wherever these research facilities are, it's not like having a city. It's not like having New York City or Los Angeles or Dallas. Like that, it's not inhabitable. So they can't grow anything there. They can't produce anything there. So everything has to be flown in. That can sometimes include food, water, supplies, medical staff, whatever the case may be. It is all flown in or brought in on ships, because they have a couple different, I don't know if they call them camps, I guess stations. They have like 3 different stations there, McMurdo, Munson Scott South Pole Station, and Palmer Station. And if they don't have an airstrip, then they have to bring in the supplies by boat, which is done by the U.S. Coast Guard. So, it costs money to utilize the Coast Guard. It's not free. Like the ships and the military personnel that we have, all that stuff costs money. And I just think that we're wasting our time and energy and resources on this. Now, here's the thing. There are several different agencies and organizations that are involved in this federal program, which is probably why they are overspending so much money. So I'm going to list these off, and some of them we have heard of before. There's the National Science Foundation, Support Contractors, Department of Defense, NASA, NOAA, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of the Interior, and the Department of State. Now, the National Science Foundation, I know they do good work, but here's the thing. Sometimes we put way too much stock in science that we ignore the facts. And sometimes we replace common sense with science. Science is very much I don't want to say, not like a spectator sport, but it's more or less interpretive in a way. And that's okay to have that. But here's the thing, like we shouldn't be pouring in a bunch of money into a science foundation when we actually need to help actual people. We have people in the United States that are dying from cancer and they need access to cancer-fighting treatment. I would think that that is more important than researching a glacier or, checking atmospheric pressure or studying the oceans, things like that. Here's the thing. If someone wants to study those things, that's great, that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that we have scientists and students that want to study that, but they need to get their own private funding. They should not be using the federal government's budget to do that. See, because way back in the day, that's how research and development was predominantly done. It was privately funded. You found someone that was really rich or a very powerful or very wealthy foundation to supply you the money. Here we have the National Science Foundation. They're not forking up the money for this bill at all. They're taking in money from the federal government. That's not right. They need to be financially responsible for themselves. Now let's talk about the support contractors. There was a Senate hearing, and I've mentioned this before, where Senator Elizabeth Warren was investigating and questioning these companies that are contractors that the federal government had hired to do a job. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they did a horrible job. They were overpaid, and it was very scandalous. Well, here's the thing. The contractors that are associated with the type of work that needs to be done for the Antarctic Program, just from what I researched and from what I saw, it seems to me like contractors, they'd like to make it seem like they're the only ones that do their kind of job in that industry. And another thing that wouldn't surprise me is if, let's say, for example, you have a contractor that specializes in, studying the oceans or something. Or let's say what's a better one? Oh, a contractor that supplies you with like kitchen supplies, like food. Because a contractor would be used in this case for that to bring them food, right? Well, here's the thing. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the contractors that work in that industry, if they basically all know each other, and what they do is they give a very similar or close price range bid, so that way, regardless of which contract the government picks, they are all overpriced. I hope that makes sense. So it's kind of like you're not really getting a fair shot in terms of monies with these contractors because they are all overpricing their wages. They are all overpricing their contracts. They are all overpricing their labor. So that way, either they can make a lot of money or their buddy can make a lot of money. That's a big problem with these contractors that are hired by the federal government because they know that the federal government doesn't care, doesn't have the time, and isn't always smart enough to research this stuff and to question some of these contracts and to really look into, okay, is this really the best person in the industry? Should we really be paying that kind of money? Are they really the only one that can do the best job? I would just flat out say no, they are not the only one. So that's another reason why their budget is so large, is because they are overspending on contractors. Then that is a big issue there. Now, I don't know why necessarily NASA would be involved in this, but I guess they are. I can see why the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of the Interior and the Department of State would be involved, because it would be a security issue. Because you're in Antarctica, and you're dealing with other countries that are doing research projects there as well, but it's not like anybody that lives there or studies there has easy access to food, water, and shelter. Like, they're not really protected in terms of safety, so they have to be protected. Like, they need additional resources to do that. I just don't think it should cost $356 million. That tells me the government doesn't know how to balance its books. It doesn't know how to shop. It doesn't know the cost of goods. It doesn't understand what labor should cost. And what's interesting is that this department, or this program, they're spending $356 million a year. A year. And this was back in 2008. So it's, considering that, that's 14 years ago, this is probably well over $1 billion that they're spending. It's probably well over $1 billion these days. I could easily see that with this. Because if they were already overspending with 50 to 200 employees back in 2008, just imagine how much they're spending now. What's interesting about the federal government, and I don't understand why it doesn't spend money appropriately or correctly, because this is a federal program, but yet the federal government has the Department of Labor. So it protects workers' rights. It tries to set the bar high of what people should be paid so that workers are protected, but at the same time, they're overspending in these programs. They're way overspending. And so whenever we see overspending, we need to be aware that those are tax dollars that are being taken away or being spent in a unnecessary manner, and they're not being spent appropriately. Should we pay taxes? Yes, everybody should. Everybody should pay taxes. It's how the federal government is spending those monies that becomes an issue. Now, I will say this. President Nixon and President Ronald Reagan both supported the programs that were, how do I word this? They were both in favor of continuing the research and development of what was going on in the Antarctic. And that it should be for peace and for science. Here's the thing, though. Even though we have two Republican presidents that are very much for it, and I think that's a wonderful thing, sometimes whenever people promote stuff in peace and science, they forget that the United States is pretty much the only country that protects, defends, and promotes freedom in the entire world. There is no other country that compares to us. Where I get concerned with this program is that there are scientists and researchers from other countries that also go to Antarctica to do their research, so they're rubbing elbows with all these different people from other countries. It's like you need to be careful what information you share with other countries, especially their researchers. It's very easy to let your guard down when someone says, "Oh, I believe in peace and science." Well, that's a great way to get someone to reveal their secrets and to talk about things that they shouldn't be talking about. See, we need to be careful who we do business with and who we align ourselves with, because if we're not careful, if we're not cautious, it can lead to safety issues in regards to the safety of the United States. And that's a big problem. Because you'd be surprised how many researchers and scientists think that they are above it all. Yes, they are citizens of the United States or whatever country, but they don't think the rules, laws, and regulations of their country apply to them, because they think, well, I'm educated, I do research, I'm saving humanity, what are you doing? That's their typical attitude. I've met some of these people over the years, these scientists, not necessarily with Antarctica, but I mean just in general. Some of the scientists that I've met over the years, they are not known for being Christian. They are not known for being a good American, meaning that they support the United States. They are not known for protecting or defending the poor. They are not known for privatized medicine. They typically believe in socialized medicine. So if they don't believe in taking care of the poor and taking care of the sick, that means they have an arrogance problem, an ego problem. And they don't care who dies, except them, of course. See, a lot of researchers and scientists, they don't have empathy for the human race, even though they are part of the human race. So I personally don't think we should be pumping in $356 million worth of our tax dollars into a program that's probably being run by a bunch of pompous, arrogant researchers and scientists that don't care if people die. And that may sound harsh, but think about it. There are so many bureaucrats within the federal government that don't care to do what's right. They work for the federal government, or they work, within a federal program, and it's like they can do whatever they want. That's their mindset. Because they spend all this money that's not theirs. Well, if it was their money, or if they had to, find someone that would supply them with money to fund their project, I guarantee you they would be behaving in a totally different way. Probably way more ethical and way more professional. Some of the scientists I've met over the years, and I'm only 38, but some of the scientists I've met, I just thought, wow, I can see why there were some very evil doctors that were Nazis. Because I see a correlation with that. And here's the correlation: eugenics. I've noticed that the more educated someone is, like if they think they're a genius, they don't think your life is as valuable as theirs, and they don't think your work is as important as their work. Because they think that they are above you and you are below them. Well, that's not equality. That's what I was talking about when I said, there are so many scientists and researchers that they don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in freedom. But yet the only reason why they're able to do the research that they are doing is because we have democracy and we have freedom. So a lot of them are a bunch of takers, and they have a problem with greed. That's what I was talking about in several of my podcasts where I've said greed is not just on Wall Street. In fact, it is way more rampant in other places where people are not looking. See, people don't realize, or they don't have, it's not common knowledge that Wall Street is very much regulated and it's overregulated. It's other industries and other areas that are not, they're either underregulated or not regulated at all. That's where really bad greed is. Because if it's not regulated, then how can you convict someone of something when a law is not even on the books? Or if a law is on the books, but you don't have the manpower to investigate something, how can you stop a crime or prevent it from happening? You know what I mean? Like there has to be something that comes to fruition with that. There has to be results. But what's interesting is that with this particular program, they hardly produce any results whatsoever, but yet they get $356 million a year. And again, that is an old number. That's from 2008. So just recognize where your tax dollars are going. Now, in regards to Antarctica, their temperatures get pretty low. It can get up to negative 60 Celsius. That's pretty cold. So that's another reason why a lot of people don't go up there and stay there. Down there, I guess Antarctica. So I'm surprised that anyone actually goes there and does any type of research, because I would think they would have already found everything that we need to know, because researchers have been there, I think, let me go back. One of the Palmer stations, the Palmer station was named after a sailor, I think it was Nathaniel Palmer, and he went to Antarctica to explore, and that was back in 1820. And then there was a geologist from Albany, New York, by the name of James Yates. He did some research up there in 1830. So research has been going on a long time, but here's the thing, not much changes with the Antarctic because it's such extreme weather. Like nothing really grows, nothing really changes. I mean, how much do you need to know about a glacier? I mean, it's just very interesting. The things that they study, I guess, are some of the earth sciences. They look at the ecosystems, astrophysics, geospace, the study of glaciers, oceans, atmospheric sciences. But here's the thing, they do all this research and this study, but we never hear anything about it. Like there's nothing that makes me say, oh, this is worthwhile, this is a worthwhile endeavor. So basically, research has been going on, and we've had a human presence in the Antarctic since 1820, but we haven't really discovered anything that's monumental or worth $356 million. You know what I mean? Like, we need to put our efforts where how do I word this? Our efforts should match how much it's costing. Like, let me put it this way. If this were a private sector company, and if it was spending $356 million a year, spending, not making money, but spending $356 million a year, and they only had about 50 to 200 employees, what kind of impression would you get of that company? You would get the impression that they are overspending. And here's the thing. Let's say again, it's a private sector company. They're not producing any goods. They're not coming out with any kind of research or development that we actually need. They're not curing any diseases. They're not discovering any diseases. They're not discovering new animals. They're not really contributing to the outcome of the human race. Now, should this program still be around? Sure, I'm all for it. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful that someone thought of this to do this, but I just think we're overspending, and it's not really doing us any good. See, because I think that since we have a problem with homeless people, and we also have issues with our veterans not getting proper medical care in a timely manner, I think spending $356 million on a desolate place is ridiculous. When we have people in our own country that are dying, they need health care, they need medical care, they need food, water, and shelter. I mean, to me, spending $356 million a year, that's their budget. That's like what's required to keep that place going and what they require to pay their people. It's dumb. It's ridiculous. So that's just the baseline. Like, that's the minimum requirement that they get every year. They get a check for $356 million, basically. They're not saving any lives. And we have people dying on the streets. Now, that doesn't mean that I think we should have socialized medicine, because that's not the answer. Socialized medicine limits medical care, and it limits your access to your doctor. Like, socialized medicine and universal health care are a scam and a lie. It's like having a leprechaun being in charge of your health care. They promise you this pot of gold, but in the end, you basically get a stone or a rock. Who wants that? So I think that this program, it should still be around, but get defunded. I think their budget needs to go down to about 10 million or 13 million a year. I think that if they want to continue to do research, then they need to get private funding. If they need more than 10 million or 13 million a year, they need to find some rich people to help them fund it. And they need to be honest with whoever they get funding from and let them know, hey, this is what we have been doing, this is what we want to do, and this is what we expect to happen. And they need to be honest with them and say, hey, we haven't really found a lot, in the last 20 or 30 years, but we want $356 million. want it to come from you. I think they need to say it like it is. Because the proof is in the pudding. We need to be good stewards of our environment and of our money and of our currency. See, what people don't realize, or maybe they're just not aware, is that whenever we overspend on federal programs like this, it causes inflation. It directly impacts our currency. Because the federal government and also state governments, they do not create wealth. They take it because it's taxes. They don't create revenue. They get taxes off of revenue. They do not create jobs. If anything, when they encourage inflation, they destroy jobs. They limit them. And then people don't get paid as much. So whenever there is overspending like this within the federal government, it's really bad. And it makes no sense. And plus, see, here's the thing. They're spending $356 million a year, but yet we have, trillions of dollars in debt. Who knows how much money we owe China? Maybe I should do a podcast about that. But, here's the thing. These employees, technically they are federal workers. So not only are they getting paid really good, but they have really excellent healthcare benefits. Probably way better health insurance than you and I have. Because that was one of the issues when Obamacare was passed, or when they were initially trying to get it passed. Federal employees didn't want the government's health insurance. Like, no, we don't want that. The congressmen and the senators are like, we don't want that. We like our benefits. It's okay to put the American people on that lousy insurance, but you're not taking our insurance. So what they did was they put a clause in there in Obamacare that Obamacare doesn't apply to federal workers. It doesn't apply to the health benefits that congressmen and senators get. Well, I would think that if the insurance is not seen as good by a congressman or a senator, then they would not pass Obamacare. And they would not want their constituents, they would not want the American people to be on something that is not the best possible health insurance. It's not good medical care. See, that's the favoritism of the federal government. And it's because of favoritism like that, that's why there is an overspending in federal programs like this of $356 million a year. We can do what we want. We're going to take from the American people, and we're just going to continue to spend. And then we're going to pass laws that you're probably not going to like. See, that tells me the federal government is disconnected from the American people. Because we, the people, are the federal government. Not the senators, not the congressmen, not the judges, not the Supreme Court, not even the President of the United States. Not even their cabinet members. They are not the only entity in the United States. They are not the only ones that represent the federal government. They have a position of power, yes, and it's very important, but we, the people, are the government. Because we are the citizens of this country. And if you're not a citizen, you don't apply to this because you can't vote and you shouldn't vote because you're not a citizen. So it's very important that people wake up to the fact that there are programs like this that are basically taking their money for a wild ride, and you don't realize it. Because, I never thought about Antarctica, ever. The only time I was aware of it was when, they would do, documentaries, or they'd have a movie about it. That was it. I had no idea that they did research there and they spent that kind of money. I'm like, wow, really? I think our tax dollars should go towards our veterans, women, infant children, cancer patients, the chronically ill. I think that we can do a better job of taking care of our own here at the home front. Because technically, that is one of our number one priorities. Besides protecting our borders and protecting our country, we're supposed to take care of our own. When we are spending money like that on programs that that don't extend human life and that do not protect human life, but yet we've got a lot of problems here at home in the United States that are not being addressed and are not being addressed appropriately, then I think that this kind of spending is completely inappropriate and it's not warranted. I mean, if they were finding cures to cancer up there, I'd be like, yeah, have at it. Go research, go find it, and bring that healing, bring that cure back to the United States. But that's not what's happening at all. It's just basically a money pit, but in the name of science. See, that's the lie about some of these science foundations and these science companies or whatever. You know, they use the word science as a way to convince people that everything they do is good and always on the up and up and they always have results. When that's not always the case. Can they do some good? Yes. I have no doubt that they do. But that doesn't mean that everything that they do is good, and that doesn't mean that they should receive federal tax dollars, because those come out of our wages. It's one thing if you want to make a private donation to these foundations. That is entirely your business. But our federal tax dollars are not supposed to go towards foundations. And they're not supposed to fund programs that are helping these foundations. See, that to me is a conflict of interest, and that warrants an audit. So I always get concerned with things like that because I feel like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And guess what? Both hands are in the pie. And the pie belongs to the American people. And those are our tax dollars. I mean, just imagine how many homeless people we could feed with $356 million. Just imagine how many homeless people, we could get them back on their medicine, get them into, a decent home, like an apartment, like temporary housing, and then help them get a good job, and then they're back on their feet. They'll be making really good money. Then they can buy their own home, something that's not temporary housing. Because we should want what is best for other people. And when we are overspending like this, it's not setting a good example to protect and to love mankind. It just isn't. I'm not impressed with this. They can do all the good work that they can, but it doesn't equate to $356 million a year. I think that's excessive. I think it is extreme. And considering that they typically only use 20 to 50 employees full time, wow. That's not right. I mean, if they can't afford to do their own research, maybe they shouldn't be doing it. I mean, maybe they should look at a different job, and that may irritate some people, but, it's your money that's being poured down a rat hole. Our tax dollars are not supposed to be used like that. I was just kind of taken aback by this. I mean, it's just like, wow. Someone's having a free-for-all, and it's not you and it's not me. So I think we should be aware and probably lift up some prayers for these people and pray for them that they stop overspending our money like that. But anyway, I will go ahead and end this podcast. But as usual, until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.